Silver brazing, like bronze brazing, is subject to continuous practice and a working knowledge of the special procedures required for its application. With the exception of the tacking and post-heating treatments, the procedures employed for silver brazing are virtually identical to those used for bronze brazing. The basic difference between the two arts resides in their application. Silver brazing is recommended and often required if the metal is thin and may burn through, if tensile strength is a priority, if it's necessary to avoid melting the base metal, and if distortion is important to avoid. Brazing cannot be used to fill large surface gaps in metals. Nor should it be utilized on metal parts such as mufflers or manifolds that will reach temperatures exceeding 1400 degrees Fahrenheit, because the soldered joints will separate. To begin preparation for the silver brazing of the single butt joint, remove with a file the sharp top corner edges of both butting sides of the plate. This action will permit the silver alloy to penetrate into the close-fitting joint and avoid it spreading over the top sides of the plates. Next, grind or file the entire joint area. Do not use a wire brush nor attempt to sand the plates with aluminum oxide emery paper, as both materials will contaminate the metal with oxides. Once prepared, the joint must then be positioned. Fire bricks may be used to align the joint in place. No root opening should exist between the two steel plates. Apply the flux to the joint area immediately after the plates have been positioned. Make sure that the flux completely penetrates the joint itself. Before you begin preheating the steel plates, check first to see that your torch flame is at its neutral or slightly carburized setting. Once the setting has been obtained, preheat the plates by bringing the joint area to a uniform temperature. Be sure to keep the torch flame off the flux. Proper preheating is usually indicated if the flux remains liquid after the torch flame is removed from the plates. When brazing with silver solder, do not tack the joint together, but instead commence with the braze immediately after the plates have been preheated. Feed the brazing alloy into the joint until the silver alloy no longer disappears from the top edge of the joint. Apply only a thin flow of rod into the joint. No bead buildup is required. The solder must completely penetrate the joint. If the alloy smokes, it indicates that too much heat is being applied to the braze. If this occurs, check again to see that the torch flame has been adjusted to its neutral or slightly carburized setting. Also check to see that the torch flame remains at least 5/16 of an inch away from the joint. Allow the plates to cool and the temperature of the steel to drop below 700 degrees Fahrenheit. Then quench the plates with water. Remove all flux from the plates by chipping and wire brushing it from the surface. Be sure to protect your hands and eyes from flying chips, because the hardened flux is as sharp as glass. To prepare the T-joint for silver brazing, grind or file the entire joint area. It should be apparent by now that the use of a wire brush or aluminum oxide emery paper is not recommended, as both materials will introduce oxide into the metal. Unlike the butt joint, the T-joint must be fluxed while it's being positioned. Apply the flux over the entire joint area, making sure that it completely penetrates the joint. Hold the vertical plate in position with a scrap metal bar. No root opening is needed between the steel plates. After adjusting your torch flame to its neutral or slightly carburized setting, preheat the entire joint area. Proper preheating is indicated if the flux remains liquid after the torch flame is removed from the steel. When commencing to braze with silver, feed the brazing alloy into the joint until the silver solder no longer disappears from the joint. Check to see that the bead buildup in the throat of the joint does not exceed 1/32 of an inch. Remember, if the alloy smokes, too much heat is being applied to the joint. Check to see that the distance between the face of the brazing head and the workpiece is at least 5/16 of an inch. Check also to see that the torch flame has remained in its slightly carburized position. Make sure that the alloy completely penetrates the joint. Finally, allow the temperature of the steel to drop below 700 degrees Fahrenheit. Then quench the plates with water. Chip or wire brush all excess flux from the surface of the plates. Be sure to protect your hands and eyes from flying chips, because the hardened flux is as sharp as glass. The treatments applied to the lap joint are virtually identical to those utilized in the two previous demonstrations. To finalize these treatments in our minds, let's once again review them together. First, prepare the plates for silver brazing by grinding or filing the entire joint area. Do not use a wire brush or aluminum oxide emery paper because both elements will deposit oxides into the metal. Like the T-joint, the lap joint must be fluxed while it's being positioned. Supporting the top strip on its free end with a 1/8-inch scrap plate, overlap the steel plates by 1/4 of an inch. A fire brick may be used to hold the joint together. Once the joint has been aligned and fluxed, preheat the entire joint area. Check to see that the torch flame never touches the flux. Remember, proper preheating has been obtained if the flux remains liquid after the torch flame is removed from the steel. Checking to see that the torch flame is in a neutral or slightly carburized setting, feed the brazing alloy into the joint until the silver solder no longer disappears. While no bead buildup is recommended, complete penetration of the joint must be obtained. Again, remember that if the silver alloy smokes, too much heat is being applied to the joint. Allowing the steel to cool, quench the plates with water. Chip or wire brush all excess flux from the joint area. Be sure to protect your hands and eyes from flying chips because the hardened flux is as sharp as glass. Preparation, joint alignment, preheating, brazing, and cleaning are all integral parts of the silver brazing process. A thorough understanding of their individual applications will ensure you the knowledge and abilities needed to perform your job.